by the high-flying rhetoric that had characterized the previous generation of writers and had been discredited as part of the failed policies and propaganda of the Wilhelminian era. Hans Fallada is closely related in style and subject matter. His novel Wer einmal aus dem Blechnapf frisst, loosely translated, Once You've Eaten Prison Grub, officially, Who Once Eats Out of the Tin Bowl, from the 1934 English translation, traces a former prison inmate's futile attempts to reintegrate into civil society after his release, only to find the return to and the pressures of free society impossibly difficult to negotiate. He is eventually relieved to be able to return to the predictability and stability of prison life. This never-ending cycle, this inexorable loop of having a run-in with the law, incarceration, release, and the seemingly inevitable return to illegality and punishment, is also the ostensible subject matter of one of the great German novels of the time, Alfred Döblin's Berlin Alexanderplatz, first published in 1929. His anti-hero, Franz Bieberkopf, released from Tegel prison in Berlin, is trying to find his place in civil society only to apparently run afoul of the law again. Imprisoned again, he suffers a psychological collapse. Eventually released from a psychiatric ward, he returns to Berlin, a broken man physically and spiritually. But the city of Berlin and the underclass from which Bieberkopf comes are the real heroes of this novel in many respects. The city, destructive and implacable, the underclass, inescapable. A more light-hearted satirical version of the big city and its merciless treatment of its inhabitants is Fabian, die Geschichte eines Moralisten. Fabian, the History of a Moralist, by Erich Kästner. Published in 1931, it was read by many as an indictment of the moral and political dissolution of German society in the 1920s, especially in Berlin. Once again, people, this time of all social classes, are shown as being chewed up by the mores of the modern metropolis, frantically trying to remain or become self-determined, but never quite succeeding. This context shows that Blood Brothers shares several characteristics with contemporary novels prominently featuring the effects of the modern big city, the almost inescapable effects of class and poverty, the inadequacies of the law, all of which are rendered in a distanced, reportorial tone, describing dispassionately what happens without rendering any ostensible judgment. Yet somehow the empathy of the reader is engaged on the side of the main characters, even those who are quite unsavory. The aim is clearly social criticism, sometimes with a moral undertone, sometimes without. Embedded though it is in contemporary narrative aesthetics, which also extend to film, Fritz Lang's Metropolis, theatre, Bertolt Brecht's Rise and Fall of the City of Mahagoni, expressionist poetry, J.R. Becher, Georg Heim, and paintings, George Grosz, Ernst Ludwig Kirchner, et al., there are some distinguishing features in this novel. It focuses tightly on a small group of social outsiders, young boys between roughly 10 and 20 years of age who have no place to go. Refugees from correctional facilities for wayward youth or abusive family situations, these youngsters have fled to Berlin in the hope of finding safety, some sort of freedom, only to find themselves in a desperate struggle for survival. Being underage and on the run from authorities, they literally have no identity. They lack the basic papers without which they cannot rent a place to live in. Without a known place of abode, they cannot be registered with the police. Without this registration, they cannot be legally employed. In short, until they become 21, they remain essentially wards of the state and will be institutionalized even without a criminal record. But as the bulk of the correctional institutions for the betterment of youth house many recidivist runaways and criminals, they become, as they do elsewhere, schools for incipient and aspiring criminals. That is certainly the picture painted here, where potentially sympathetic policemen and judges are locked into the pattern even when all indications clearly advise a different approach, as in the case of two of the boys, Willi and Ludwig, who figure prominently in this novel. They will try to escape from the hamster wheel of illegality and petty crime and gang life, but the lack of papers and previous acts will prevent that until one of them comes of age. The bulk of the boys described here, girls play only a peripheral role, mainly as prostitutes,